Welcome to the live podcast, Win More on Purpose. Today, we have Will Aitken with us on Pick Up the Darn Phone, How to Cold Call with Confidence. The agenda today is it's going to be more conversational. We're all here learning together. So make sure to write down those questions. There's going to be a Q&A at the end. And just to start off, everyone can put into the chat, what is it that you're focusing on in your business? Where are you coming in from today? Or even just what it is that you do. For those who don't know me, my name is Yaacov Steinberg. When I first went into full-time coaching about 4.5+ years ago now, I noticed that people were able to get to 6-7 figures on their own. They're good at what they do. They're passionate. Some point along the way, they learned how to speak to people, but they'd hit this glass ceiling. And many times because they were just making it up as they went along, they never gotten training of any kind before, and they didn't really want to be that sleazy, stereotypical used car salesperson. And that's kind of where I came into the picture. Mindset, technique, skills, really giving people that confidence and clarity to take their game to the next level and understanding who they needed to speak to, where they were going to find them, what to say, how to say it. And thank God I've had the pleasure of working with quite a number of pretty well-known people on the platform of LinkedIn, whether it's Chaya Fishman, Hody Blach, Hody Greenberger, and people at the 6-7 figure realm have been able to grow about 50% in the first 60 days of working with me. People at the 100K realm, give or take, have been able to grow by even 150% in the first 60 to 90 days. And solopreneurs just starting out even 200, 240% in the first 45 days. Will, really excited to have you here today. Let's get this show on the road.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, Yaacov. Impressive numbers from yourself up front. So let's keep delivering that value for people, eh?
Thank God. We just try not to get in the way.
That's it.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll go into the questions.
Oh, I'm not that interesting. But yeah, myself, my name is Will Aitken. I run my own business, solopreneur. Now I actually have one employee, so I guess I'm no longer a solopreneur. But yeah, recently went to business by myself about 6 months ago. Previously, working a lot in the sales space, and prior to that in direct sales roles like account executives. I've never been an SDR, but I've always cold called regardless of what I'm selling. So hopefully I can bring some of that insight to y'all today.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, I've been watching you on the platform for quite some time. And it's been, one of the things that I think that you talk about a lot is cold calling, which is why that was going to be the topic of our conversation today. And I think the first thing that so many freelancers and small business owners especially don't realize is what are some of the things that are missing out on by not doing cold calling?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time with cold calling, it's really easy to make sometimes excuses not to do it because it's one of the scarier parts of reaching out to strangers, right? An email is a lot easier to send. The rejection hurts a lot less when it's over a screen versus over the phone. But cold calling would be really great because it's still one of the most direct ways to have real conversations, both from a generating new business, but also learning and talking with your buyers and getting to understand them a lot more. And it's just a really quick way to get to that. If you use it as correctly as the right tool, you can have some great conversations. Some of the best conversations, one of the biggest sales I've ever made have all come as a result of cold calling. So I think as long as you do it the right way, it can work. Now, the problem is a lot of people don't do it the right way, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. Right. And therefore they try it. They feel like it doesn't work and they leave it behind again. They miss out on this gold mine of potential business that they can get from picking up the phone and talking to their buyers.
Yeah. And I would say that one of the things that really people miss out on the fact is the level of relationship that you can create on a cold call, right? Something that you can't really get from a screen back and forth until you hit a meeting, right? So there's this certain rapport that can be built through the tonality, the way that people hesitate. There's so much information that you gather through a phone that you can't get in other mediums that are below that, right? So like there's 5 levels of communication, I always say. And the highest level would be in person, then it would go down to a video call, but then we have phone call right there in the middle before we go to DMs and then emails. So if your main way of getting communication is even through DMs, you're still that one step below where you're not really getting all those cues that you get and the same relationship that you can build through cold call.
Yeah. I think the role of a seller or someone who is doing the role of sales is trying to find the truth. And people are going to give you more of that the higher on those kind of levels of communication that you listed that you get. Heck, even if we take the example of in person versus on a Zoom meeting, I've seen prospects at events who told me what was ended up being a bit of a lie as to why they didn't end up buying on a Zoom meeting. And then when I met them in person, they're like, oh, by the way, this is what actually happened, right? So again, if we just lay that down and look at our options, we can't jump on a Zoom meeting cold with someone. Cold calling is almost the best thing we can do to talk to people who haven't spoken to before, if we're not at events or those events aren't available to us.
Yeah, and I think it's very powerful what you're saying in terms of like the truth. People have much more of a tendency to be honest when you're in front of them and the closer you are to them. And I think that's a very good point. You mentioned earlier one of the reasons that people aren't doing cold calling as often as they should is because of fear. What do you think some of the other reasons around it are, other than perhaps, I think you also mentioned like a lack of training. They try it once, it doesn't work, and then they give up on it.
Yeah, I do think fear is probably the biggest one, and then a lot of the other reasons come up as like uh, excuses and proof to validate that fear, right? Oh, I heard that cold calling doesn't work anymore. Or I tried it before and it didn't work. But all of that almost always comes back to the fact that, frankly, it's scary to pick up the phone. It's scary to call someone and put yourself out on the line like that and open yourself up to that type of real rough, sometimes rejection. So I've found there's tons of reasons people don't, but most of them always link back to the fact that it is uncomfortable to do. And to get out of that discomfort, you have to do it a lot, and you have to practice, and you have to really be intentional about how you go about it as well. So
building up that confidence muscle.
Building up that confidence, which hopefully people can walk away with today.
Yeah, and let's jump into that right away. I mean, the first question I think that people are going to ask is, how do you know who to call, and how do you find those people? And then from there, we'll go deeper into like the individual aspects of the call itself.
Yeah, I think I've said this a few times, but when we're looking at prospecting, reaching out to people, trying to grow our businesses cold, when we're executing, I think that's the time to execute well. And when we're planning, that's the time to plan well. So I think if you do the planning really well, it makes the executing a lot easier. My father-in-law is a very handy person. Love it when he comes. He fixes 10 things in the house every time he visits. He always says, measure twice, cut once. So when I'm thinking about who I want to cold call, that's my prep, that's my measuring. So that way, when it comes to cutting, executing, making the call, it makes it a lot easier. So when I'm thinking about building a list, I'm looking for something that is a common trait amongst the people I'm trying to reach out to that would suggest that they're more likely going to be facing some of the problems and challenges that I can potentially help them solve. And I'm being very intentional about the language here. I'm not assuming I can help them potentially solve. It's very my goal here is to learn if I can, not to say I can, right? So I might look at people who have bought from me in the past. I might look at one company who I'm like, wow, that makes them a really good fit. And then I might go find 20 other companies who are showing similar signs that would also make them a fit. And that's going to make the actual execution of making the calls way easier, because I know now I'm calling all 30 of these people for the same reason or same kind of reason. And therefore I don't have to do as much thought and as much preparation when it actually comes time to execute. I can just do all 30 calls and know what I'm going to say and reduce a lot of that thinking and task switching when it comes to calling, because it is something that gets easier the more you do it. So if I'm doing an hour of cold calling, I want to be focused just on the cold calling. Whereas when I build the list, I think that's an hour earlier, and I'm looking for something, a common sign, symptom, trait that would suggest that they might be more in need of my services than someone else. Give you an example just to make this a little bit real. If I'm selling web design, I might go out and find 30 local companies who are all in a similar space to one of my existing clients. So that could be, I had this great success story where I redid a jeweler's website, let's say. Well, now I'm going to go find 30 more jewelers in my province up here in Canada who also have sites that may be not as well optimized, and I can use that story, right? Or it could be, I know that this if I'm selling construction services, if I know that people, or let's say I'm selling tree felling, let's just use a B2C example here. If I'm selling tree felling services and I know someone recently purchased my tree felling services because there was a tree next to their house that was a bit close to their house and was giving them a bit of anxiety, I might go canvass the area and look for properties and focus my time calling on, reaching out to, knocking on the doors of people who have trees that are within 5 meters of the house. So I'm looking for that core reason, because that can then lead into the reasons for my call, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point that you bring out. It all boils down to going down deeply into your ICP, or ideal client profile, and really understanding who is it that potentially, like you said, and I love that intentionality. I think I made up that word.
Intentionality, yeah, I love it.
It works.
There's definitely a word that's similar to that. That is the right one, but we'll allow it.
We'll go for it. But it's really having that intention of who is it that could potentially benefit from my services, delving deep together with them and really digging into what is it that they're going through. Do they have those similar issues that a lot of the clients that have used me in the past have? And thereby that would potentially make them a good fit, and they might be open to hearing how I might be able to help them, because that's really what it is. It's about service. And
It qualifies them,
that's
but
where
it
it
also gives you
starts.
information that you can use up front to make them, more about them as a result, right? And that's
Correct.
often the thing when people get cold calls. Most calls aren't very good. They're normally getting calls from
Right.
people trying to sell them credit cards or duct cleaning services or extended car warranties. So when you can leave with something like that up front about them, that shows that you're more of a someone to be trusted, someone who's worth listening to, you get their attention a lot more often. And I think what you said there about ICP, really important. Your ICP is like, title, company size, industry, maybe, right? Take it a layer deeper every time, regardless of you sending an email or call. You need to find the thing beyond that, because that's often not enough, and that's where we get into that really genericville, where people easily ignore us.
Yeah, one of the things I do with my own clients is going into the psychographics. Like, what's really bothering these people on a deep level? What are their deep fears, their deepest needs, desires, worries? What are their internal limiting beliefs and external limiting beliefs? I don't need to necessarily know what car they drive, but I want to know what's going on in their head. So, like Marcus Chan talks about the whisper test. If I'm going to walk into a restaurant and I know this person is my ideal client, I can whisper in there and say, "Hey, John, I know that you're dealing with X, and Z is keeping you up at night, and F just makes you want to quit. I'm sitting over there. Let me know if you want to talk." And he's getting up from talking together with his spouse or her spouse to come and talk to me or their partner so that they can have a conversation, because they want to know how I'm in their head so much.
You build curiosity. You must know something else.
It's creating that undeniable curiosity. And we're going to get into a little bit more how we can play that into the call itself. But let's take that a step deeper, right? So how do you need to say things in order to get people's attention on a cold call?
This is like the biggest thing that I see new reps struggle with. When they get on a call, they immediately, their default is to either be actually nervous, which comes in the form of a lot of high up talking and talking really fast and just trying to get through it. Nerves come through in the tone. Or the second thing is people do this weird thing where they put on this like customer service tone, where like, "Oh, hi there, Yaacov. It's Will Aitken here." And it's like, it's overly friendly. It's got lots of uptones. It's like all over the shop. And that immediately tells people, it lets them sort you into one of those bad cold callers that I mentioned earlier. You don't want to sound like that. You want to really sound like the way that you and I sound right now, having a conversation. So just think about how you talk to your friends. To think about how you talk to, not necessarily the words you say, because some of those things are very personal when you're talking to your friends and your partners and your family. However, just the natural way you speak. Lean into how you actually communicate, because then you're going to sound comfortable, and therefore you're going to be comfortable to listen to, and you're actually going to stand out more than these people who are trying so hard to sound a certain way or accidentally ending up sounding a certain way.
Yeah, and a big part, it's like what you said, it's that tone and it's the timing, and it's really making sure that the way that you're coming across is just level-headed. It's just a regular conversation. Like, one of the things that I tell my own clients is, please just take the cold out of the call and let it just be a phone call. Pretend you're calling one of your friends without being overly, friendly and like, "Hey, how you been?" We definitely don't want to do that. And like, that's the next thing we're going to talk about. But let it just be a call. Let it just be a research call, just getting to know them, understanding what's going on in their world, and take it from there. The less squeaky and high pitched and nervous and all of that you sound, and I'm just going higher and higher here, the more you bring that down, the more you calm down the call, the more they'll be willing to give you a chance to hear what it is that you have to say once you show that relevancy.
People who know something, who are worth talking to, often don't have to try that hard to sound that way. That's the main thing.
That I have something that you could potentially benefit from.
Exactly.
And you fit into one of these buckets. Let's delve into that a little bit, actually. When we actually make a cold call, what do we say once we get them on a phone? Let's talk through a cold call for a minute here.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few fields of thought and a few different things. I actually sometimes switched up, which I'm not super keen on recommending people do, because oftentimes when you change things too soon, you don't really get to test them and get proficient in them. But there are probably two avenues where I can take things down. The first one is oftentimes a what people call a permission-based opener. This is something that you've probably heard before. It's something to the effect of, "Hey, Yaacov, it's Will here. giving you a quick buzz. If you got a moment to chat, I promise I'll keep this brief, right? That's one example, right? I like to actually sometimes layer in a little bit of my research in there to even stand out further, because now people are hearing those a lot more. That's kind of a widely adopted technique. And instead I would say, hey, Yaacov, I couldn't help but notice that you spotted that you opened a new retail location last week. Have you got a moment to hear why that prompted me to give you a buzz? Or have you got a moment to hear why that stood out to me and why it made me want to pick up the phone and give you a call today? And therefore, I'm immediately going, okay, I've done something more than the 10 dozen other calls you've got maybe this week or month. So that's one field of thought. The second one is actually quite a cheeky one, especially for business owners, because oftentimes if you're starting a startup or you're trying to really first get into market, you don't have to lie. And that is, hey, Yaacov, it's Will. Look, I'm in the middle of some research and I was hoping you might be able to help me out. You got a minute? You got a second? Or just maybe even end it, hoping you might be able to help me out. And that's leaning more on the fact that people often want to help others, and you're appealing to their human nature in that one. And when you follow that through without coming hard on the pitch and actually come across and ask questions and be curious, you are fulfilling the promise of research. So especially for people who are new to a market, when you're really trying to network, this worked really well for someone I was coaching recently. They work in partnerships. They had a hunch that they should be partnering with community banks. They weren't sure though. I said, why have you not called these people? So I said, I'll call them for you. So I called a few CEOs of community banks and said, hey, I've got a hunch and I'm doing some research and I think based on the fact you've been in the space for a while, you might be able to help me out. And they're like, yeah, sure, I'll talk. I'm like, well, here's what we do. And I feel like it might make sense to partner with community banks, but I just don't know, because this is a totally new idea. And I thought you might be able to validate that idea or give me some pointers. And then I'm doubling down, like, can you help me because you know more than I do? And a lot of people go, oh, well, you're coming across subservient in that sense, but it's actually genuine curiosity, because in that case, I did actually want to know. I just didn't know what I didn't know. The person I was coaching didn't know what they know. And we were able to validate actually community banks, after a few calls, after a few tests, probably weren't the best fit for them, because they were looking for people who are working with thousands of home buyers, not hundreds of home buyers. But then when we spoke to home warranty companies, because they speak with thousands of home buyers, and use that same approach, the idea was validated, and we're actually able to book a few meetings off the back of those conversations with people who are willing to give us information. So that's another angle. So first one, to recap, hey, spotted this. It's so-and-so from this. You got a moment to chat? I'll keep it brief. Or got a moment to hear what made that stand out? Or the second one would be, hey, it's Will, in the middle of some research, hoping you might be able to help me out. And that's it. That's the first lines.
Yeah, and these are very, very underused tactics, without question. My personal favorite is actually one where it's permission-based, honest, and at the same time a little bit humorous. So there's a couple that I like to use, whether it's, hey, Will, Yaacov here. This is a cold call. Can you give me a minute so I can tell you why I chose to call you today, or would you rather throw your phone out the window? Right? I think you've even used that throw your phone out the window line. Yeah. Another one would be, taking it up a notch and just adding another layer there. I might do something like, hey, Will, this is Yaacov. This is a cold call, but I got good news. It's not about a timeshare or your car's extended warranty. You think we can grab a minute for me to tell you a little bit about why I chose to call you today? Right? Yeah. Same idea, but again, it leans in there on that permission-based opener. We have that honesty. This is a cold call. Don't try to rack your brains to figure out who I am. We definitely don't know each other. There's intentionality. That word I made up, which is I'm calling you for a reason. I chose to call you. And there's that humor piece, right? So it's going to automatically interrupt their day. Yeah. What'd you say?
You'd like to know they're not just another person on a list of thousands of people being robo-dialed.
Exactly.
You're actually someone with human and a bit of personality. I think what you're saying there is very good as well. Like if you can layer some humor in there, or if you can lean into who you are. I mean, especially as a business owner, this works amazingly. It's something I don't often recommend to sales reps who work at a company, because it can backfire. But if you really want to lean into who you are, and you know that you don't end up working well with people who don't work well with you, then why not be lean all the way in? So something I've been doing lately is, like, I literally say, and I'm not recommending this is just because it's who I am. I'm like, what's up? It's Will. Most people do not get cold calls that start with what's up, Yeah. But because that's me, I'm self-selecting. If someone doesn't like that, then chances are they were probably never going to buy from me anyway. Because 100%. If I wasn't to book a meeting with them by pretending to be something I'm not, they'd probably find out. And then I'd have to, one, take them through a whole sales cycle. And then I'd actually have to deliver on the work as well, because I'm a business owner. So then, like, it wouldn't work out if they really butted heads with that approach, and that's who I am. So knowing that and leaning into some of those things and taking either the frameworks that we just mentioned, the permission-based or the research or whatever it may be, and applying your own spin to them can be a massive hack, because then also it can't be canned because it's unique to who you are, and that's ultimately what makes us all unique.
Yeah, and I think that it's a very important point in the sense that you need to figure out what works best for you, right? What's going to come off your tongue in the best way that's not going to sound like you're reading off a script? What's going to feel most comfortable? Like, if you would never say the words "what's up," please don't say them. But at the same time, anything that we're saying here today, you could figure out your own twist on them, right? Easy example, I saw there was a very popular cold caller on LinkedIn. He's always wearing yellow.
He's always wearing yellow. Let me just think about it. That's a fly.
Hold on one second. I'll tell you who he is. I can't remember just this moment. He's like the weirdest cold caller trainer or something that he calls himself.
Oh, the UK's most hated sales
Italian.
trainer? Oh, he's Italian. Okay. Oh, yeah. I know who you're talking about. Someone sent me a message the other day saying, "Hey, you know this guy?" I was like, "No, I don't."
One of the things, he got a cold call from a 9-year-old, and this guy's Italian. He said to him on the call, "Can you give me a minute to tell you why I'm calling you today, or would you rather eat pizza with pineapple?" Julio, exactly. That's who
Julio
it is. Thanks, Abe.
Sargentini. Julio Sargentini.
Exactly.
That's it. Yes, I know him.
He got a phone call from a kid who literally said to him, "Or would you rather eat pizza with pineapple?" He's Italian. He's like, "I'm not going to eat pizza with pineapple. What's going on?" He's like, "I don't have a choice but to let you talk. Like, I'm never going to do that." So it's just make it connected to them, make it real for yourself. You've seen my Calendly link. It's the same idea, right? It's in your process, weed out the people that aren't going to like your style, so that when you're working with them, you're having fun.
Exactly. And if you're having fun, it takes away a lot of the pain and the fear of what we spoke about cold calling earlier as well.
Exactly. Let's take it down to the next level. Okay, so I went through my opener. Now what do I do?
So hopefully they said, "Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you," off the back of one of those two openers, let's say. And that's where you could then go, again, repeat the piece of research that you did that made you want to call them in the first place. So again, bringing back to that really good targeting. You get that wrong, a lot of this gets a lot harder. But I'm going to say, so let's go back to the jewelry store example, and let's say I'm a website builder. I might say, "Yaacov, yeah, so like I mentioned, I spotted you've been running your website online. Maybe you think that you might be looking to generate more e-commerce sales." There's kind of two big problems that people run into when they do that. Number one, big problem. Number two, big problem. I don't suppose either of those are issues for you, or are you absolutely crushing it right now and getting tons of online orders? And then that launches me into a conversation about problems. So those problems could be, number one, they're getting lots of traffic to their site, but they're not seeing many sales come through. Or number two, they're really struggling to get anyone to even visit their site in the first place. So those could be my two problem statements. And then I go, "Or are you absolutely crushing it right now?" And I give them an out as well. People like options. People hear that and they're like, "Oh, you're giving the option to say no." But if you take away the option, they're actually more resistant, right? Give people an out. And also the way you frame it, and I say, "Oh, you're absolutely crushing it right now." Let's be real. No one's going to be like, "Yeah, I'm absolutely crushing my jewelry sales on my e-commerce store." And ideally, your targeting is targeting on people who probably don't have the best websites, right? So you can assume they're probably not making enough sales, but you don't want to say that because that's like calling someone's baby ugly. So that's where I go into, again, here's the framework. Spotted this. Maybe you think you might be trying to do outcome. A lot of people run into these two big problems when they do that. Problem one, problem two. And this is where a lot of storytelling can come in. Are those either of those issues for you, or are you absolutely crushing it? And that way you get self-selected. They go, "We're not getting any website visits." Or they go, "No, we're actually owning it online." I'm like, "Wow, that's awesome." If they do say that, I'm like, "That's great. That's fantastic news. I'm really happy to hear that for you." Do you mind if I ask, do you, and this is where we get into a bit more of objection handling, but it's more like, I might even ask for some pointers. What really made that switch for you? Because most people, when they start, it's a slow going. What change did you make that maybe saw you get lots more people? So then I'm actually staying curious and maybe just trying to learn from them. And people want to boast if they're doing well as well. So I'm also encouraging the conversation to keep going. And then later on, I might still find out that they have a problem. Or I might find that they are able to refer me someone who might not be crushing it, right? So either way, that's how I get people to self-select and get the conversation started on a problem, which is where I like to have my conversations in sales, almost immediately, right after the opener.
Yeah, one of the ways that I've always found to work really well is going straight into one of the top three pain points that they're experiencing. So I've done the research already. I know that they're my ideal client. I know the psychographics and the pain that they're usually experiencing. So if they're going to fit into my wheelhouse, that means automatically they have to have one of these three problems. So
Yes.
similar to the way that you do it, I'll call and I'll say something like, um, they'll give me permission and I'll go straight into a lot of the people that, I speak to in X industry because I know where they are. I did that research. Tell me
Yep.
that they're struggling with either this. I usually stick with one problem. Tell me that they're dealing with this problem, and the result of that many times is X percentage is impacting them. Are you currently experiencing it right now, or how are you currently dealing with that?
Yep.
From there, I'll usually move into, depending on what they say, I might delve into it a little deeper. I want to ask a little bit of follow up on that, of course, because I want to dig deep into whatever else is going on. I might have at least one, if not two more. I want to have those other two pain point questions ready to go just in case that one flops.
Okay.
If they don't hit all three, it's fine. Even if they hit one or two, it still might be relevant for them to hear what it is that you potentially can help them with. If none of them hit though, so then fantastic. They're doing great. Wish them a fantastic day, and then ask them for referral. We'll come back to that in a minute.
Yep.
But that's usually the way that I would go through it. Like knowing those top 3 points, similar to what you did. You went with problem 1 and 2. Over here in that first one, I'm just going straight for what I think their top pain point would be, laying it out, what the impact of that is. What we usually see, people are experiencing, a 20% churn rate, and that's
Yep.
impacting them in, $100,000 a year. How are you guys currently handling that? So right away, they see I've done the research, which is the whole point of this section, is you're asking questions that show that you've done your homework. There's relevancy there. You obviously do work with their exact type of people because you've hit the pain points on the head, which
Yep.
opens them up, one, to being willing to be honest with you and tell you the data as it stands. Because remember, we're starting with hard questions right away.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult questions that you're going for because it's a cold call. You don't have time to go through an opener, tell them about yourself, earn the right to ask those hard questions. You're going straight for the money on that first step. And if it hits, it hits.
Yeah. And I mean, to your point as well, depending on how good your targeting is, you can be more specific about maybe 1 or 2 or potentially even 3 problems, right? But
Right.
generally, if your targeting is good, you can normally hypothesize what the problem might be in those cases, right?
Exactly.
And if, let's say, we're looking at janky websites, then it probably is going to be a conversion issue, right? We might lead on that. That's just, I'm going to keep using that example because I know it's an easy one for most people to understand. Most people have a website, and most people get helped
100%.
by a lot of web developers as well. I won't lie. So maybe we could talk about some ways they could do it better. I think the last piece is with that up front as well. You don't talk about what you do. Both your example and my example, we didn't mention what our companies offer to actually do about that.
Exactly. Right.
We're just talking about the problem. So that's really important because most people assume, because of just the way we're trained to believe, that we are meant to call these people and pitch them and tell them about what we do. No, we want to focus on the problem. We don't want to tell everyone and try to make every square peg fit in a round hole. We're looking for people who have those problems because those are the people who are generally going to have an interest in continuing the conversation with us. And oftentimes, even if someone says, no, that's not a problem for me, they'll then go, what is it you do to help with that? And then you've almost got the invite in there, right? You can give like a brief elevator and then ask a question off the back of that and continue the conversation. Do not come up people with how you're actually going to help them until you already know that they have a problem. You wouldn't go around prescribing medication if you're a doctor to people who you didn't know were not sick. You're right.
Exactly right. And one of the things here is, just like in a discovery call, even, we want to make it all about them. And the way that this is different from how, we used to cold call 15 years ago is those, then people really didn't pay attention to these facts, but it was just, hey, my name is Yaacov. I'm calling from ABC company. This is what we do. This is how we help people. We should totally talk. Click. And the reason we got Habang is because it was all about me. It had nothing to do with you, right? I'm going to try to quickly tell you exactly what I do. Yeah, I'm going to try to quickly tell you exactly what I do so that you'll give me the time of day. And in all reality, once we moved away from that within the sales world and we realized that, hey, it shouldn't be about us. It should be about service over transaction, giving more than taking. Great. First, find out if you or someone else might even be able to serve them. That's true service. And then you'll see whether or not you do fit into the picture and how that can move forward. So we've gone through the questions. How do we end the call with a booked meeting in hand? So what do we do
Hmm.
next?
Yeah. So after I've outlined a problem and they've validated that that is a problem that they might be seeing or shown curiosity in how we might be able to help, I'm going to try and understand a little bit more to validate that. But if they are facing that problem, then that's an open door for me to say, okay, it seems like, and what I'm going to do is, so let's say I say problem one, problem two, and they go, problem two is a big problem for us. We're not getting anyone to visit our website. All right, okay, what have you tried so far? Or how long has that been going for? How long have you had the website up for? Is this a recent thing, or has it always been lower than you would like? I'm going to try and open up
Impacting
just
you.
a little bit more, just to
Right.
really get them thinking about and feeling it. And I'm going to say, okay, well, look, the reason I'm calling is because I thought that might be the case, but we help with have helped companies do this with that, and it sounds like you're seeing this problem. And I'm going to recap what they say, and we help people solve that problem by doing this. Would you be curious enough to maybe, when I'm not calling you totally out of the blue, a bit more formal, jump on a call, and I can walk you through what other companies are seeing success with? And then I'm using peer and social proof, because other people want to know what other people in their space are doing. We, as sellers, get to talk to lots of the same types of people. They really probably only have 2 or 3 friends in their network who do similar work to them. So we can add value there as well by sharing social insights of people who are like them. And then they go, yeah, okay, I'm interested. Or they say no, and then we get an objection. And then it comes time to start trying to handle objections, which is a whole other topic. But really, the moment I hear any kind of curiosity or interest from them, or I validate that there is a problem, I'm going to then pivot that into my reason to try and book the meeting, because once I've got that, that's my invitation to try and do that. And if I leave that, more often than not, I've found that I end up on the phone for too long, and then I actually talk myself out of a meeting, or they hear something that puts their guard up, or whatever it is. So if you've got that interest or a problem, go for the meeting all the time.
Yeah, and it's very similar the way that I do it. Once I have the validation that I do have something that could potentially help them, I'll move into, it seems like exactly the way that you do it. It seems like this is something that we might be able to help you with. Are you okay with me telling you a little bit about what we do here? And if that's a fit, great, we can move forward from there. If not, no pressure. Right? So I'm giving them that out there. From there, I'll probably give them my context pitch to give them all the reasons why I would want them to move forward potentially with working with me if I'm the right fit for them. So that's what it is that I do, exactly what I did at the beginning of this podcast. The relevancy, it's a story where they're going to see the relevancy, the pain, the solution that I offer, some of the people that I work with, and the results they're seeing. If I'm the right fit for them, that'll push them towards, you know what, I am interested in hearing about this. I'll end, my context switch with an ask. Does this sound something that's interesting to you that potentially we should talk on a longer, proper discovery call? If yeah, they'll probably move forward. If not, we'll move into objection handling, like I said. Very similar approach, not really that much of a difference there. Let's move into objection handling, right? So we'll make this a little bit brief, because we could talk an entire session on this.
Yeah, it could
But
be.
how do you deal with objections? Is there like a secret formula that you use yourself, or?
Yeah, I think is it a secret, patented formula? No, I've heard of people do put their own spin on this type of thing as well. But I think the main thing to identify is when someone gives you objection, are they saying no to you and your offering and your service or the problems, or are they saying no to the idea of the interruption of the cold call, right? And oftentimes people hear no and they assume that means that someone's not interested in their problem or offering or service or who they are, when the reality is that person's just saying, no, I don't want to be cold called, leave me alone, right? That's very different from someone saying, no, I definitely don't need Yaakov's, business services because I'm not facing those problems, right? They're not getting even that far into it, because people's default reaction is to reject. Like I call this rejection reflex. There's a really great video on YouTube of this guy. He walks around and he gives out silver on the streets of New York. He's in the diamond district, and he holds out this silver to people. It's like worth $200 a piece, and he says, do you want this? And they're like, no, because they're busy and they're doing something. Even though what he has is of value, their immediate rejection or reflex is to say no, because they're like, what's the catch? I don't understand what this person's offering me. I'm busy.
Same idea
I'm
as
on my
giving
way
out gift
somewhere.
cards.
Are you going to try and sell me on a timeshare? Yeah, exactly. And I did this exercise with a team that I was working with last week, where I gave them gift cards and I sent them out in Montreal, and they tried to do the same thing, and the same thing happened. They were giving out money. Sure, it didn't look like money, but it was free money to people, and people still said no, regardless. So knowing that people are going to reject you regardless, it's about sometimes breaking them out of autopilot. And I find the best way to do that. So when I get an objection like not interested, send me an email, I'm in a meeting, I'm busy, call me back later, I'll call you back. All of these things are oftentimes not necessarily the truth. And like I said, the goal of a cold call is to get to the truth, but they're more so a way to try and get you off the phone. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to say, totally happy to do that. Happy to call you back later. Happy to shoot you an email. Let me ask you this. If there's a few different ways depending on what the objection is, but I'm basically going to say, let me ask you this. When you say call me back later, given I've got you now, do you mind if I share 30 seconds about problem? I'm going to try and reframe my problem statement in a different way to how I did it the first time. Because sometimes when you ask someone the same question or say the same thing to them twice, the second time it actually sinks in. It's kind of very similar to when you reactively say, hey, how are you? And you go, yeah, I'm good, you. That's like the default response, right? And the default response to a cold call is I'm not interested. Whereas when you ask a second time and you say, sorry, but how are you? They go, oh, well, I'm a bit tired today. And then you get the real answer, right? So the same thing. I want to do the same thing on a cold call. I'm going to reframe that problem statement and then ask a question to lead off from the back of it. So if they say, call me back later, I'm happy to call you back later. Totally, apologies if I interrupt you there. Just so I don't call you back later and totally waste your time. Is it that, your website right now is generating all the business you want from it? Or is it just that you're really busy right now and you genuinely can't take a call? And then I've kind of almost reframed the problem, given them a couple of options, still kept the choice in their hands. I'm not pushing it on them because that's where a lot of people get really frustrated when a seller just tries to bulldoze past
for
them.
an answer, right?
Yeah. And that's when I get to the real answer potentially. And they go, oh, well, our website isn't probably doing it. And then I can try and go, okay, well, look, if I have caught you in the middle of something, maybe it does make sense to schedule some time when I'm not calling out the blue and talk about how we sometimes help companies with that. It may not go exactly like that, but that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to reframe that problem so I can break them out of autopilot, get them to hear that problem again in a different way, and then answer a question or make a choice between two different options. So if it's send me an email,
right back to
very
the sales
similar.
help desk days.
Yeah, that's it. That was kind of what it was. Kind of two options.
I personally, after doing the research on it, I really like the way that Marcus Chan talks about his HEART framework. So HEART stands for heard, elaborate, aside, re-clarify, and transition. So the basic way that works is once I know that it is a real objection, right? So I want them to feel heard, that I'm actually listening to what it is they're saying. I want them to elaborate on the objection so that I have a really deep understanding of what they're actually saying, not just surface level, but deeper down. What is the core objection? Once I have that in hand, aside from the real objection, ensuring that there are no others, otherwise I'll go back to stage one. And then once I know this is the only objection that I have to deal with, re-clarifying the value and having them share what they do like about whatever it is that I'm offering them, the service, the product, whatever have you, and then transitioning them back to what we already discussed earlier to show why the objection isn't really an objection anymore. And what this does is it really delves deeper into what's actually going on their side. And again, if they really legitimately don't have the time for it, you're not going to get through the HEART framework at all.
Yeah.
So obviously using what it is that you said is
the truth, right? That's what we're trying to do. Get to the truth. They say, no, I'm genuinely busy right now. Okay, I'm not gonna push beyond that. All right.
And that's the whole point.
I found the truth.
Right. And then we'll just stop right there. But being able to go through that, if it's not necessarily the truth, this will lead you towards it and what's really holding them back. And then potentially you'll be able to move into, that discovery call that you're trying to schedule. Because one of the things, and I think this is important to point out, please keep your cold calls and your discovery call separate. Don't try to let a cold call turn into a discovery call. Yeah. They're not in that same frame of mind. The way that I explained this to a client the other day, when you go on Google, you have one type of mindset. When you're on YouTube or Instagram or LinkedIn, you might be in a different mindset. When they are on a cold call, they're not in the mindset of buying. They're maybe going to be willing to sign up to a different discovery call, but they definitely didn't come with the intention of getting anything that you have to offer. So allow yourself to please, just like a research call should be separate, keep this separate from a discovery call, schedule it, and then do it then. Even if it's later on the same day. I happen to not have the time to do the discovery call now, but you know what? Let's schedule that for 2 p.m. Oh yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
Please.
And that also gives you more time to prep for a discovery call. Because I think a good discovery call, you come with some facts and some research. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't research before you make these cold calls. Like we said, targeting is important earlier. But you're not going to go and spend, 10 minutes on every single person you should be adding to your list. I just don't think that scales well. You're not going to have people to call. You're going to make 10 calls and be like, oh, well, now I need to go spend 2 hours looking at other people's stuff. But if you come with that minimum viable piece of information that made you think they could be a fit, and then you book the discovery call, then that warrants at that point, they're further down the pipe and therefore are worth investing more time into to make sure you're prepared for that call. And like I said earlier, if you spend that too much time on that cold call, all you're doing, if you're getting them interested and then continue the call, is increasing the chances that they might suddenly hear something. Or, heck, you've called them out the blue, something might just come up. Oh, sorry, I've actually got to go right now. I'm actually late for a meeting. Bang, you've lost it. You've lost that. So if you get that interest or that curiosity or that problem, go for the close, go for the meeting. You're going to do a much better job of actually finding out the problems and maybe showing them a few ways you might be able to help when you have prepared and you and they are in the right mindset. That's really well said, mate.
Yeah, thank you. How do you deal with rejection, right? One of the parts of cold calling, one of the truths when it comes to cold calling is you might need 280 no's to get 20 yeses.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with the rejection side of cold calling, or what some might say the dark side of cold calling?
Yeah, there's a few ways. I think number one is almost said what I just said. They're often not times rejecting you or your product. They're rejecting the idea of the call. And sometimes because a bunch of other sellers have ruined it for you because they've got some really bad calls in their time. So again, not taking it personally. Most of the time when someone says no or gets upset or gets angry or rejects you, they're not actually rejecting you and your offering and what you put in front of them. They're often just rejecting the idea of being interrupted. So that's fair, and that's their right to do so. The second piece is I really gamify it, and I won't lie, I'm in a unique position because I record a lot of my calls now because I find it makes great content where I can show people how I'm doing it and the highs and lows. But in a way, if all my content ended up being, yeah, well, that sounds great. If I'm honest, I invite rejection as well. And if it's rejection in the sense that they're generally not a fit, that's a great outcome as well. Now, one thing that really helped me with mindset when it comes to calls is if I make the minimum viable outcome for a cold call that I've learned something new and I stop thinking about this cold call, the purpose of it is to book a meeting. Booking a meeting is a really big chunk. That's a really big goal because most cold calls won't convert at that level. But if you say, I learned that this is the right person to speak to, or I learned that this person isn't the right person to speak to, or I learned that they prefer email, or I learned this about their company, or I learned that they're not a fit. All of those things can be outcomes that you should invite and welcome instead of just focusing on the one, guiding star of a meeting. You can have all these other things that you can almost have mini wins, because otherwise, if we look at the conversion stats on even a good cold call, might be looking at out of every 100 calls, 20 people might pick up if you've got good data. And of those 20, you might book 4. Even then, we're looking at 16 no's for whatever reason, 16 potential hang-ups or no, or that's not a fit, or that's not a problem, or we have a vendor and they actually do a really good job of and we wouldn't want to change anything there. Well, if we know that's going to be the outcome, then we just need to accept that we're going to have to roll with some of those to get to the 4 yeses, and that's okay as well. Right. It's all good.
Yeah, and there's 2 things you said in there that I would delve into a little bit more. One is the gamifying aspect, where make it a game. I know, according to data, I'm going to need, let's say, 280 no's to get the 20 yeses. That's 1 no closer to getting to your goal. You're almost looking for the no's at that point, not because you're intentionally trying to get the no's, because you want a yes, obviously, but you know that it's going to take a certain amount of those to get you to the yes, right? There is a certain amount of numbers game when we're talking about it. There's also the side of goals, where a goal should be something that you can control versus, let's say, a target, which is something that's out of your control, right? So when we're talking about a goal, I can control how many times I pick up the phone, right? So I like action-based goals in the sense that, okay, I'm going to make 20 cold calls right now, or I'm going to make 100 cold calls right now, whatever it might be. That's something I can control. And the target would be, I want to close 4 meetings, whatever. I can't control whether they say yes or no, right? And that would move into the transactional side of things, where if I was actually trying to do that. And then the last thing I would point out is the failure aspect that you mentioned, which is failure is not the end. It's a stepping stone towards success, because as long as you're learning from the mistakes, you're dusting yourself off and you're keeping yourself moving forward, you're learning. And that's not a failure, right? So I think that that's a really important piece as well that you mentioned, in the sense that it's all about mindset and perspective.
So well said.
The more positive you are, the easier this process is going to be.
Yeah. It's statistics. If you know that you convert 1 out of 10, well, then you welcome the 9 no's because you know it's one step closer to the no. But if you don't like those conversion stats, well, that's where you invest in training, you invest in joining sessions like this, you learn new skills, you try new things, repetition is always going to make you better at any skill. You do more of it. And then all of a sudden, instead of 1 out of 10, you're getting 2 out of 10. All right. And then there's less of it. So if you look at like a stats game, I think that's a perfect way to break it down.
Nice. Just 2 last questions here before we go into the Q&A. Let's talk about the nuances of the call, right? There's a lot that people don't realize when it comes to tonality, putting the emphasis in the right syllable, as I like to say, and things like that. What do you think are some of the things that people need to, focus on? Maybe something that we didn't cover yet today.
We covered a lot.
Oh yeah.
But I think there's also a degree of emotional intelligence of what you're hearing on the other end. And I think you need to factor that in. Like all these frameworks, like me going, acknowledge, reframe, respond with the problem in 2 options. If someone is going, no, I'm busy. Or if someone's going, no, I'm really busy right now. I need to know the difference between those 2 things. So the EQ side of things, like being able to read what's going on the other side and mirror that.
Soft skills.
Yeah, the soft skills. So there's like all these frameworks and things. But you also got to know that there's going to be times where they don't apply, and you've got to learn those as well. And you got to remember that you're calling human beings. That's one side of things. And then the other thing is just repetition. No one's first cold call was good. Not one person was going to be like, yeah, my first ever cold call, picked up the phone, handled 20 objections in a row, booked the meeting in. They actually showed up and then they ended up buying. Come on. We know that any skill in life, whether it be skipping, cold calling, shot put, the Olympics coming up, I'm going to, songs on my mind, obviously. You need to do it more than once, heck, more than 100 times to actually be somewhat confident doing it. And even then, you've probably still got another 1,000 reps before you're really proficient at it. And then you maybe got another 10,000 reps before you could say, I'm an expert. So you've really got to remember that despite all of this, you take all the frameworks, there's going to be a lot of fail in between here and there. But it will be worth it because, frankly, what are the alternatives? Not doing it, probably, maybe heck, if you're not cold calling, your business is doing great, then yeah, maybe you don't need to.
Right.
I'm going to guess that a lot of people aren't in that situation. They would like their business to grow more. So they should cold call, and therefore they should have to go through that learning experience, which is going to be painful. The repetitions will make it easier. So there's some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, definitely. I would also add to that 2 things. One, it's a lot of it boils down to what you're not hearing, right? So really pay attention to the tone that someone else is speaking in, not just in your own, right? We spoke today about the tonality that we're having, but a big part of being successful on a cold call isn't just doing that. It's also having, like you said, the emotional, awareness, as well as I would also add the situational awareness of, can everyone come out of this in a way that they're going to be pleased, they're going to be happy, they're going to, what are the projections and the different, pieces of situational awareness, comprehension, and really just understanding what's going on with the people that are in the call with you to really make sure that this is something that could be well for them. And I think also one of the things that Dale Dupree talks about is that if we can sit back and understand that time is the currency of sales and attention is the exchange, we're not calling in the hopes of setting up an appointment. We're calling in the hopes of earning time. And that's very, very different than just trying to put down another discovery call on my calendar, right? So I think that's another piece that I would add there as well. I guess my last question would just be like, where do you think is the place that someone should start if they want to begin with this today, or they just want to get started? What do you think is that first thing that they should be doing?
I'm going to assume that a lot of people who may hear this advice are probably working in a similar environment to the one that you look like you're working in there, and the one that I'm in right now, which is in a room on my own, in my basement, left alone with my own thoughts and a phone that needs to be rung. That's really intimidating. So I'd say find a buddy, make it easier, go out and do it with someone else you can share some of the failures, some of the wins with as well. If you can find someone in your network who maybe also wants to try this and do it with them, maybe don't have to do it in person, but have someone who you can say you're in that gauntlet with together. think that's definitely worth doing. Also go out and find some maybe additional lessons and learnings. If there's questions that didn't or don't get answered here and there's something still you're curious about, go and do it. There's tons of recordings online, both my own and plenty of other people of successful cold calls. So go look at those and look what you can learn from them. Look for maybe something I always say with sales advice is like, if I tried to listen to every single sales trainer I respected, I would have very few options left on what to do, because a lot of them have different styles. And sometimes it's about figuring out, listening, finding something that I like, taking that and go, oh, I really liked what Will said about the two options. I really like what Yaacov said about how he handles an objection, and then mashing that to find what is your style and how you're going to best deliver on that. So go out there and find extra information, but then also like look for things that are going to work for you. Look at recorded calls, and then of course, go make the darn calls, because if you don't do that, you'll just never know.
Yeah, and I would say like that's the first thing. Like just start, just pick up the phone, make mistakes. You'll learn from it. Get the phone hung up on your face. It's fine.
They probably
Nothing's
won't
gonna
remember.
happen. Yeah,
Even if it goes horribly, they will forget you by tomorrow. They'll have 10 other things that happen in their life.
it is no joke. They have so many other people that are calling them. If you do a terrible phone call, you could probably call them the next day and they wouldn't remember it.
Exactly. And if you're not, then you could just change your accent every time. So get good at like doing an Australian accent, a British accent, American accent. You know.
Yeah, 100%. So let's open the floor for some Q&A. We'll give a minute for people to throw some questions in there. And in the meantime, I would even say, like, I think that one of the biggest pieces of successful cold calling is having that resilience to being willing to just keep moving, even when, it's uncomfortable, right? There's a lot of rejection that comes along with cold calling. There's a lot of, as long as you're, even when you're trying to keep everything at arm's length, when someone tells you to, go fly a kite in much harsher terms, it can affect you emotionally. So make sure that you're taking that space to deal with that. Don't just like shove it under the rug, because it's just going to come back to bite you, which is where a lot of the emotional health problems come up within the sales world. Deal with it. Like, don't just let it sit there. I think that's an important piece to point out as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we have an interesting question here. I think that you're going to like this.
Okay.
What do you do when someone hangs up on you or farther into the call?
So normally it's going to be in the first minute if someone's going to randomly hang up on me. And I'm going to look at the symptoms of why they hung up on me. Now, what I'm not going to do is let that get to me, because it's just like the same as they're saying no to the interruption. They're hanging up on the interruption oftentimes. But I'm also going to then diagnose what happened before the hang up that led to that. What can I change? Sometimes it's inevitable. Even the best cold callers get hung up on. But was it my tone? Is it the fact I tried to push through one of their objections and bulldoze them? If the call was going well, or I'd got past my opener, I might call them back. But even this can lead to some pretty irate prospects. And frankly, I don't love being chewed out for no reason. So I'm not going to be a suck for punishment and call them back and be all cheeky like, oh, I think we got disconnected, because I've heard people say that. And sometimes it's worth it. Most of the time it's not, and you're just going to get someone who goes, no, I hung up on you, and then say some expletive words at you, right?
I've been there.
But like, you can always, again, if they hung up on me, I'm just going to mark them as a hang up, and I'll probably call them again next week and try something different. And if I can see that they hung up on me last time, that tells me that maybe if I use the permission-based opener for the first time, then maybe I'll use the research one this time. And if they hang up on me again, then I'm probably going to start to think this person maybe just isn't someone who I can reach this way. There's nuance there. So, one, don't take it personally. Two, probably call them again, but not right away unless you are actually having a worthwhile conversation with them before they hang up. And then, three, just don't let it get you down. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that, all very, very good points. But I think that another thing that people need to realize is that, one, because of the fact that they're not going to remember you the following week, you can change things up, right? So I think that's a very important point that you bring out, and the fact that any particular opener isn't going to work for every single person, right? So like you said earlier, switching it up with going into a research-based opener, or one that's going to have more humor than a different one, or just leaning into a different type of, trying to have them open up, can produce really great results. It really does depend, I think, like you said, like whether or not we're going to actually call them back. I've definitely been on the side of both sides of that, where I've called people back. They're like, no, I hung up on you. Click. But then a lot of times it's thrown them off where they're actually willing to listen. And it has gone the other way where they're like, they don't know what to say because like they actually did hang up on you. They're not actually willing to say that out loud.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden they're open to like, why was it you were calling again? Now again, we're not trying to manipulate people. We're not trying to ethically persuade them, whatever the heck that means. It sounds like an oxymoron. Uh, but
Ethically
ultimately,
swayed. I like that.
but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's really like you said, it's trying to get down to the truth. So really
Yeah.
diagnose why they hung up on you. Was it something you said? Was it just the bad timing? Was there something else going on? Did you not listen to them deeply enough? I think that's one of the biggest things that people face when doing cold calls is they really want to be successful. And like you said, they'll ramrod straight through. They'll bulldoze a little too harsh sometimes, or sometimes they're not even doing that. They're just not listening as
Hmm.
deeply as they need to what the other person is saying. So double check yourself, like we always say in sports. Watch the film, right? If you're
Watch the
recording
film.
your calls, go back and see what it is that you did. If you're not, at the very least, debrief yourself right after that call and
Yeah.
understand what it was that led to that, and see where it takes you.
I think that's a really good point. And to be honest, the symptoms of someone that lead someone hang up on you is normally that you haven't given them space to do anything else. They hang up when
Yeah.
they feel trapped and they don't have the opportunity to say, no, I'm not interested, or this isn't interesting, or I'm busy. And that often is because you're talking too much. So that's what I'd be looking for at the game tape. If I was being harped a lot, I'd be like, okay, was my opener too long? And this is why like a lot of people are like, oh, don't use a permission-based opener. Go straight into the reason for your call. Your hang-ups will skyrocket if you just go in
So high.
straight from what we started at. If I start the call off and I was like, hey, Yaacov, it's Will here. Look, the reason I'm giving you a call is because I happen to notice that you're going to be like, there's a lot of information coming at you and you're going to feel trapped and you're not going to be able to get a word in. And that's going to lead to more hang-ups, right? So that's
And
why
it's
I
all
don't
about
take
you
that
as
approach.
opposed to all about them, so they're not interested.
Exactly. And a lot of people go, oh, well, that's how you should do it. But I'm like, okay, what I've seen work for me, I don't want to undermine anyone else's success because, again, there's so many different people out there and everyone has a different approach that works for them and their personality type. And, of course, their type of buyers as well. We all sell to different people and different archetypes of people. So I would just be careful of, one, just make sure you weren't talking too much. And if they came with an introduction, maybe you steamrolled them and kept talking. And then they just felt like there was no other option other than to just beep, click.
Yeah, and that all boils down to the 90-10 rule, right? We want to be doing 90% asking questions, which is 90% listening, and only 10% talking about whatever it is that we called for.
That's it.
So as long as you stick to those rules, you should be pretty good.
That's it.
I always like to end off these podcasts reminding people, please don't try to put everything that you learned today into implementation right away. I have an entire page of notes, and if I was going to try to do all of this in one shot, I wouldn't get anything done. So please take one thing that you want to start with, go for that, see how you're able to deal with it, add things slowly as you move along that process. Will, you mentioned right before we got on the call that there was something you wanted to offer everybody listening to this or here today. And I'll pass the mic back to you to go ahead and offer that.
Yeah. So oftentimes the first challenge is to start calling. So to make that easy, if you want to do a practice call, you can call me whenever you see this on my number, which is +1. So don't call me if you're abroad because I don't know how international area codes work. If you're in Canada or US, call me +1 902 916 3524. That's 902 916 3524. Give me a buzz and try out your thing on me, and I'll give you some feedback as well. But it also will help you rip off that band-aid and hopefully continue to make calls even once we're done on the phone.
Yeah, and I as well, I put that into the chat for everyone who's here. And I would say when it comes to, this live podcast, one of the things that we really try to focus on are things that are timely, interesting, that really add to their skill set box. I would say as well, if anybody's looking to take their sales game to the next level, 30-minute free strategy call, you can definitely, my contact information, my Calendly, as well as my WhatsApp, is in the comments. In the description, there'll be ways to contact me as well as Will. And it's just, something that you should definitely jump quickly. They disappear quite fast, I have to say. But same, if, anybody's interested in working on their cold calling and just, have a couple of minutes to, go through that, role play a little bit, I'm happy to make some time to help you through it. And Will, I just want to say thank you again. This has been absolutely smashing. I had a great time. And I think that it's been very impactful for those that are here and those that are listening.
Pick up the darn phone. Really appreciate you,
That's
mate.
it.
Thanks for having me on, Yaacov. Great.
100%, my friend. We'll speak soon. And to everybody else, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.